Welcome to B'madzaje Ginonindwa. This podcast is produced by the Communications Department at the Anishinaabeg Nation. We will be focusing on the issues and initiatives in Anishinaabeg Nation territory. I'm your host, Lisa Abel. The Anishinaabeg are the people of the Great Lakes. These 5 freshwater seas are known in Anishinaabemowin as Nayanan, Nabimang, Gitchigamin. The Great Lakes are sites of Anishinaabe storytelling and traditional ecological knowledges that have been passed down from generation to generation since time immemorial. The Great Lakes system holds approximately 18% of the world's freshwater supply. Spanning more than 1,200 kilometers from west to east, the Great Lakes provide water for consumption, transportation, industry, and recreation, and are integral to the ecology, climate, culture, and economy of North America. Water from the Great Lakes drains into the St. Lawrence River, and therefore that ecosystem is directly affected by the quality and quantity of water from the Great Lakes. The health of the Great Lakes is under threat from pollution, climate change, and invasive species. Agencies and legislation exist to monitor, protect, and restore the Great Lakes. What can people living within the watershed do to help? In this episode of B'madzaje Ginonindwa, we will be hearing about Benogamy, a collaboration between the Royal Canadian Geographic Society and Canadian water advocacy charity Swim Drink Fish. The Benogamy Initiative is creating multimedia resources to bring people together to understand the history and the future of the Great Lakes. Our guests, Patrick Madabi and Meredith Brown, will tell us why protecting the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence watershed is so important, and how Benogamy is integrating Indigenous languages, ceremony, and traditional knowledge to share ways that everyday people can learn, connect, and take action. Meredith Brown is Director of Special Projects at the Royal Canadian Geographical Society. Meredith has devoted her career to freshwater protection. She has served as the leader of the charitable organization Ottawa Riverkeeper and is currently a member of the Great Lakes Water Quality Board of the International Joint Commission. Patrick Madabi is co-chair of the Benogamy Shared Circle and a Swim Drink Fish ambassador. He has served the Anishinaabeg Nation and many others through numerous leadership positions, including as former chief of Ondegamnekaning, former Anishinaabeg Nation Grand Council chief, and as current commissioner on governance for the Anishinaabeg Nation.
Bonjour, Widase Dejnakas, Ondegamnekaning, Minising Donjaba, Magize Dorum. I'm Patrick, and I introduced myself by my spirit name, Widase. It was a name given to me by the elders of the Lake Huron Treaty Area. It means warrior, but not in the sense of somebody that goes to battle, but someone who's like protects his people. And it's kind of a role I played for many years as a chief, deputy grand chief, Ontario Regional Chief. So I'm from Ondegamnekaning First Nation on Manitoulin Island, and I'm the Eagle Clan.
Bonjour, my name's Meredith Brown, and I am actually from North Bay. I grew up here, but now I live north of Ottawa in a small little village called Wakefield on the shores of Tenegadino-Zibi, the Gatineau River. And how did I come to be so lucky to be working with Patrick Madabi? Lots of convoluted stories and many paths, but I've always worked on freshwater protection for my whole career, and for many years I was the Ottawa Riverkeeper. So I did a lot of work on water protection for the Kichisibi, and one of the issues that I worked on a lot was nuclear. And I know that Patrick, wearing his hat as the Grand Chief at the time, was also very involved in really raising awareness about the huge challenges with nuclear waste and how that will impact our water. And so as time progressed, one of the things that I thought was really important in terms of water protection was our relationship with water, and also our stories and how we use storytelling to protect and ignite curiosity and ignite passion for action. So I found myself starting to work on Great Lakes issues for Canadian Geographic. And one of my colleagues that I've worked with in the waterkeeper world for many years, Mark Matson, had been working with Patrick on the Great Lakes Guardian Council. So that was really instrumental for all of us crossing paths and starting to work together on the Great Lakes.
Well, I think I have to attribute the awareness that I have about the importance of water to Josephine Mandaminba. She was the inspiration to a lot of us, with the waterkeeper movement.
Anishinaabe Josephine Mandaminba is a founding member of the Water Protectors Movement. She is an internationally recognized grandmother water walker. In Anishinaabemowin, we use the suffix ba after someone's name so that others know that they have passed on and are no longer of this realm. In 2003, Josephine Ba began walking around the Great Lakes to raise awareness about water pollution. Over the next 14 years, Josephine Ba and the Mother Earth Water Walkers walked an estimated 17,000 kilometers around the Great Lakes, inspiring thousands to participate in water walks in communities across Turtle Island. Josephine Ba also served as Chief Commissioner of the Anishinaabeg Nation Women's Water Commission and was a predominant contributor and leader of the Great Lakes Guardians Council. She is highly revered for her work. There were times she could barely walk, yet she didn't let that stop her from continuing the water walks. It's fitting that we acknowledge her impact as Anishinaabe advocacy for the Great Lakes continues today in many forms. Before we learn about how the Benogame Project is creating materials to educate about the Great Lakes St. Lawrence watershed, Patrick started by sharing how the group chose the name Benogame and how the project is grounded in Indigenous teachings and ceremonies.
I'd like to talk a little bit first about how we came at the name Benogame. When the Swim, Drink, Fish and Royal Canadian Geographic were embarking on this initiative about looking at water protection, a number of issues relating to water, I had been working with both of these organizations and taking a look at the types of work they do. And the projects are varied, but also so crucial to the importance of water. I was describing that, and I called a meeting of some of the language keepers that we have and elders that we have. So I was speaking primarily to Donna Dabaski, who's from not only originally from Okamakong, but lived in Chiging for a while, and Barb Nolan, who was originally from Okamakong, but lives in Garden River. And I was describing, this work about, how to make sure that the water is good for first drinking and be able to go in there, safely, not worry about jumping in the lake for a swim, and how aquatic life is so crucial to it. And they tossed some various terms back and forth. And one of the ladies said, Benogame. And she says it means clear water, clean water. But the more important aspect of that term Benogame is, it's kind of the neat thing about our language is that our language usually has teachings with it. And although Benogame, if you just say Benogame, be is water, Nogame, it means it's clean. Basically, the teaching that goes with that is it's our shared responsibility. That's the important element of this initiative, is the shared responsibility of everyone, to make sure that we keep this water clear and clean for, future generations forever. So that's how the Benogame term came about. So I thought it was important for that background. I think it's absolutely very, very important that I mentioned that this whole Benogame initiative has been grounded in ceremony. We did ceremony to launch this, with a water ceremony at our launch at Niagara-on-the-Lake. And we had an elder from Okamakong, Linda Manitobi, do a water ceremony. And her Anishinaabe Nosewind is Thunder Woman. And the power of that ceremony was something else in itself. But, the Creator was really there that day, because the minute she just was finishing the ceremony, we heard a clasp of thunder. And that was awesome. And we had asked participants from every direction to bring some water with them and to put it in a joint vessel, copper vessel. And there was it was Meredith, you went out on the lake, didn't you? On the canoe with Linda Manitowi, and they poured it into the water. And it was a really powerful, symbolic start to this initiative. But from even before that and that ceremony and onwards, we're really relying on guidance from the Anishinaabe, knowledge keepers, Haudenosaunee knowledge keepers, and we're engaging Innu knowledge keepers.
Patrick added that even the logo of the Benogame Initiative incorporates Indigenous teachings.
And one thing I want to touch on is, there's lots of symbolism, with things that First Nations people will bring to the table here. And one of the symbolisms is even the logo of the Benogame Project. It's a water body, but on the top you see like a raven or a crow, and on the bottom it's a sturgeon. And it's done in a very stylized. It was done with First Nations input into that thing, and I really like it because on the top the crow or the raven is symbolizes the role they play on Mother Earth. They're scavengers. They clean up above water. And the sturgeon is a bottom feeder, and they clean up the bottom of the lake. And that's even shows shared responsibility right there with creatures of that the Creator put here on modern Earth. And then the onus is on us as human beings, to also really wake up to this idea of a shared responsibility.
That's interesting. So you're talking about how we have our Indigenous approaches to water, which include culture, spirituality, and protocol. And I see that the Benogame Project, it has a pretty large scope. It's really wanting to raise awareness and create a movement around protecting the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence watershed. Can you talk about that, that really big area that we need to start protecting or starting to become aware of?
Absolutely. And I think even just starting with the scope of, why the Great Lakes, St. Lawrence, and why now? And as we know, the Great Lakes St. Lawrence is the world's largest freshwater ecosystem. It's incredibly important to obviously all of those who live within its boundaries, but it really is important from a global scale. And all of the water in the Great Lakes drains out through the St. Lawrence River into the Atlantic Ocean, and the Gulf of St. Lawrence is the world's largest freshwater estuary. So we have this immense responsibility to take care of these waters. And I think what we found in the world of working on kind of water protection and conservation over the years was the Great Lakes were just not getting the respect that they deserved and the attention that they deserved in terms of like how important they are, how incredibly interconnected everything is. And most important, what we found when we started thinking about working on the Great Lakes St. Lawrence is that, of course, the most important part of this story is around the original peoples from the Great Lakes St. Lawrence watershed. And most people are really shocked to learn that there's over 200 sovereign First Nations in the watershed. And of course, we thought if we're going to do work on the Great Lakes St. Lawrence, we're going to really raise awareness, we're going to really educate others, we really want to have this two-eyed seeing approach, braiding knowledges and really helping people understand, as Patrick said, our shared responsibilities is, solving a lot of the challenges that we have around keeping our waters clean really has to be collaborative. There's no doubt about it.
What are really the most important reasons why people need to be concerned? Can you talk about some of those things that are going on in the watershed?
Like some of the threats to the health of the watershed. I mean, the place is huge. Almost every issue you can imagine is happening within the Great Lakes St. Lawrence watershed. We have nuclear, we have urban development, the population influx into the Great Lakes St. Lawrence watershed is huge. And we all know with climate change modeling and predictions, there's going to be people flocking to our region for the water for lots of different reasons. We know the population is climbing, so urban development. We have lots of pollutants from all kinds of things, but we have a huge problem with our nutrients and agricultural pollution. So when you look at our map, you can see pretty clearly, because it has land cover on the map, it's no surprise that Lake Erie is the most polluted lake of all the Great Lakes. When you see like there's no forests left around it compared to Lake Superior or the Ottawa River watershed, it's all, agricultural or urban land. So that's a huge issue. Nuclear, like we know that Canada is investing more and more in nuclear. We know that they have their eyes on building a deep geological repository for high-level nuclear waste on the shores of Lake Huron. They've just approved, I call it the nuclear dump on the Ottawa River, and these are wastes that last for thousands and thousands of years. So that's and then we have our biodiversity crisis. Like we have climate change and biodiversity. Those two crises are kind of intertwined. And we know that we have rising temperatures. We have every year less ice cover. We know that the ice cover on the Great Lakes and all lakes in general is decreasing. You can see it this year as a prime example of what's happening. And so there's obviously like issues for humans on that, but what a lot of people don't recognize too is that there's issues for fish and spawning health and all kinds of different relations that we have that are impacted by decreasing ice cover. Yeah, and we have a lot of species that are endangered, threatened, and particularly when you look at all the work that's being done on what species are most endangered, it's the freshwater species that are really in danger. So there's a little bit of everything happening in the Great Lakes St. Lawrence watershed, and I think glyphosate spraying is another example. Like we're putting poisons right on our lands, whether it's through agriculture or forestry spraying. And so, why would you poison the very things that sustain us?
And you really shake your head, at some of these decisions that are being made about, putting these nuclear waste dump sites right close to water bodies. Who would even think of doing that? Has any sense, any kind of common sense. The elders tell us, with seismic activity, or you talk to, hard rock miners, man isn't as strong as nature. And seismic activity, the power of water itself, I don't think there's any vessel that humans could create that could stop, nature if nature wants to do its job. And I think even this climate change is Mother Earth, fighting back to a large extent. So when you see these things happening, we want to create this, learning and education curve for people to start looking at water from a different perspective. Because, like I attended a water symposium at Guelph University of so-called stakeholders that had businesses surrounding water or used water in some way related to their businesses. And every one of them, all they could think about was the dollar value of using that resource. And yet they didn't realize if that water got so polluted or was not usable anymore, that would be the end of their business. And Chief Linda Dubosky was with me at the time, and she put a bill in front of her mouth, said, "You can't drink this stuff." And that's why, water is so crucial. Water is life. You can only last so long without water.
The issues are plentiful. They're all over the place. One thing that we really wanted to do with this project is to help people understand the amazing parts about the Great Lakes St. Lawrence watershed and what we have to lose if we're not careful. Because often we don't want people to think, that there was a time when the Great Lakes was known politically as the Rust Belt. And it was like, all the manufacturing and, oh, it's so dirty, you wouldn't want to swim in it. And we really want to bust those myths and let people know that we have these amazing places in the Great Lakes St. Lawrence watershed. And, if we're not smart, we'll lose those. And so a lot of what we want to do with the project is celebrate all those amazing the rich biodiversity, the places that are so special, where where we are able to swim, drink, fish. And that's important too, so you don't lose hope. And we want to shine the spotlight on the people that are doing amazing things. That will help.
Since Benogame is looking to raise awareness about the Great Lakes St. Lawrence watershed, I asked about the kinds of educational resources that would be created.
So from the perspective of Canadian Geographic, we really excel at cartography, mapping and storytelling and education. We have an amazing network of educators across the country. And so we thought we could use our strengths to help really increase people's awareness and understanding about the Great Lakes, about the people of the Great Lakes, about the wildlife and plants of the Great Lakes, and about how everything's all interconnected and about our shared responsibilities. So that's really how we started in the crux of Benogame, and we're so fortunate to be learning from a lot of Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Innu people along the way. And I think we're going to be creating these materials that are going free of charge into schools, and we're really excited about bringing this kind of braided knowledges into thousands of classrooms across the watershed. So imagine we're creating these big giant floor maps. So imagine your school gymnasium. These maps that we create fill the floor of the gymnasium. And so imagine the Great Lakes St. Lawrence blown up to that scale that it fills the gymnasium. It's very, you can't imagine it until you walk on that map and experience it, and then you'll see all the indigenous languages on the map embedded into the regions where they originally spoke. All the names of the nations are on the map, the treaty boundaries, land cover, and then in different regions, we have these triggers that are built into the map where once you're on it with your device, a story will come up. So when you walk on the map, the first story will be about the story of the water walker, and that's what will greet you. But so the stories are almost like hooks, because as you can imagine, they have to be fairly short and succinct. But then we build out these resources for teachers, so each story will have lesson plans attached to it where you can really dive deeper into the subject matter. And for those lesson plans and stories, we're really doing our best to braid knowledges, and we've hired, for the lesson plans, we have Indigenous and non-Indigenous educators working together on the lesson plans, and actually our whole lesson plan framework is based on the medicine wheel. So it's the map, the lesson plans, the AR stories are really exciting, great hook. And the fun thing about the AR stories as a hook is that it allows us now, we're looking at getting it into places in the community outside of school. So really getting this in front of youth is our first priority. But now we have excitement from science centers, galleries, in terms of let's get the general public on these maps and hearing these stories. So I think we really have an opportunity to reach a very wide audience and really have people starting to think a little bit differently about their relationship with water, with the lands, with all the living beings in the watershed, and how much our well-being depends on waters that are clean and pure.
The Benogame team brought a prototype map to the Anishinaabeg Nation Lands and Resources Forum, so I went down to the conference room to experience it firsthand. The full color map of the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence watershed is 8 meters by 11 meters, which is about the size of half a tennis court. I joined other participants to walk on the map and explore. It shows many Indigenous place names and language areas, and it has augmented reality stories embedded into it. I asked Canadian geographic educator Katie Doreen to explain some of the features of the map.
So I'm Katie, I'm Mohawk from Tyendinaga, and I do a lot of the editorial and education coordinating for this project. So usually I get to just talk to different Indigenous people from different nations and see what kind of stories they feel like they want to have told. And then I get to kind of designate resources to make sure those stories are told in a good and respectful way to the people who need to hear them. Those help Indigenous and non-Indigenous people reaffirm their own connections to the watershed in their own good ways. So this big map is 11 meters by 8 meters, and it shows the entire Great Lakes St. Lawrence watershed. So you can see every drop of water that falls within this darkened area here somehow makes its way into the Great Lakes and flows through all of them. That's what the flow lines are showing, and makes it into the Atlantic Ocean. Everything outside of that goes to a different watershed.
And what languages are used on this large map?
We're trying to get all of the original languages of the land represented here. So you can see in the one purple color here, we have some of the languages that are still spoken, like in this dark purple. Like Kanyankeha, my language, is there. That's why we still speak it. That's why it's dark purple. And then these other ones are no longer spoken. Like Erie, it's a light purple. So you can see that this is a language that belonged to the land, but because of colonialism and other unfortunate things through history, we have lost that language now. So it also highlights the importance of strengthening those languages. We have the place names written in Anishinaabemowin and Kanien'keha where it's relevant, where the people live. And on the next edition of the map, we'll have the big water bodies also labeled in those two languages. We're talking to so many people because our cultures are so place-based, right? Every different nation has a different word that they use to describe their connection to place. So over years, we've been interviewing and chatting with elders and knowledge keepers from different places to figure out the names we need to be using. The first thing people do when they get on the map tends to be they want to find their place. And naturally, people congregate around it, and stories start coming out about where trap lines were and where they grew up and where they've been. And all these just stories connecting people to water start pouring out of people. And it builds up that connection in a really organic way.
You know, when Meredith talks about, products going into the schools, that is so important because these people that are coming out of the school systems, they're going to be the future leaders that are going to shape policy, they're going to shape direction, shape laws. And I think they need to really learn, how crucial this whole Great Lakes St. Lawrence water basin is, so that, as we go way into the future, they're very conscious of the need to look after water. And the mapping is so exciting to me. I see it as actually correcting and rewriting history of this country, because we'll be putting, the real names of some of these water bodies, beside the name that it has presently. And the stories that will be told about it will be our stories. Whether it's from an Anishinaabe perspective, a Haudenosaunee perspective, or an Innu perspective. People will be able to do that.
Tell me about the conversations you had about how, you're taking into account Indigenous and Western sciences in looking at the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence watershed.
And we've created and have had our first discussion with what we're calling the shared circle. And we've, identified some folks from the different regions of the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Basin who are Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Innu, to rely on for guidance, on these issues, because we want to make absolutely sure that we're doing things in the right way, and using the knowledge of these people, to guide us. and look at maybe perhaps the need, if we're going to expand that shared circle to encompass other people with, maybe other types of knowledge that would be essential to this whole initiative of the shared responsibility to keep water clean. So I wanted to mention those things because that's very important. This is grounded in the right way, right from the get-go. The two organizations of Royal Canadian Geographic and Swim Drink Fish are very respectful of the doing this the right way with the guidance of the First Peoples.
I know that Patrick talked about this a little bit, but the working together piece is key, and he talked about just even involvement in decision making. So I've done a lot of work over the years on governance, watershed governance. That's just really like who's involved in decision making, who's got a seat at the table. And what I learned really quickly in my time as the Ottawa River Keeper was that here there's 11 Algonquin Anishinaabe nations, and they're never involved in the decision making. They're very rarely at the table when it comes to like really important decisions that are being made. And it's not that different. It's the same situation that's happening across the whole Great Lakes. Patrick was involved in a time when they were negotiating the Great Lakes Compact and bringing the chiefs together to say, hey, we need to have a say in this compact, and nobody's invited us to the table, so we're going to make our own way to the table. So this concept of working together, and I think, like, as a person who always worked on water, and I grew up, like, I was trained as an engineer, so we were trained to think about water as a resource. But what I learned over my years working mostly with the Anishinaabe people that I was fortunate to work with in the Ottawa River watershed, it really opened my eyes up to the Indigenous worldview of water. And I just really strongly believe that if we can have people thinking differently about their relationship with water like Indigenous people do, it can really change how we manage our future and manage water. I think it's extremely powerful. And so I know from my own point of view, braiding the knowledges has been paradigm shifting for me. Yeah, it's really amazing.
Well, the traditional ecological knowledge of our people that goes back centuries, we've lived on this water all our lives, and our ancestors have. And it's important to bring that knowledge to the table, but I look at it this way. There's good thinking, in all peoples, and we need to collaborate and develop relationships that, as I said in my earlier comments, about like-minded people that see the importance of water. When you think about, the nations that are around the Great Lakes, both Canada and the U.S., and they have agreements about how they're supposed to protect the Great Lakes. But, they've been involved in agreements over 50 years. And I don't think, from my opinion, that there's been, the required effort, to have that stewardship done by high levels of government. The lakes have deteriorated over that 50-year period. And that's why we talk about the shared responsibility. Creating alliances, creating awareness that every individual, every group, industry, organizations, all levels of government must take that responsibility. So this collaboration and building relationships, we're talking to, mayors in the United States. We're going to be talking to tribes in the United States. We've got to engage, the people in the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Basin, both native and non-native. At the end of the day, we hope this Benogame project is something that, really catches the eye of everyone. Even worldwide for that matter, because the lessons about how to respect water and how to treat water, it's a living spirit. And we're working, and we really are proud of the Anishinaabe Nation Youth Council that are championing the cause of trying to have water designated as a living spirit. And there's tribes in the Quebec area under the leadership of Ghislain Picard, Quebec AFN regional chief, has already gone to the United Nations in New York to champion the cause of designating water as a living spirit.
This might be a tricky question, but how can we help regular citizens really understand the regulations or the kind of jurisdictions or where decisions are being made? How do we help people really understand that really important policy and decision-making piece?
I really like to encourage people to understand what's happening in their own small community. So start with your house, and what are you putting down your own drain or putting on your own property, but also thinking about your community. Like, do you know where your water comes from? Is your water coming from the ground? Is it coming from surface, from a river or a lake? Who's treating it? And I think it's such an important piece for everybody to know where their water comes from, and then to be involved in protecting that water source. That's your drinking water. Like, there's nothing more important than the water that you drink. You don't want it to be laced with chemicals. And if you can get involved at that small community level, that's where we're going to make the difference. So that if you feel like your community is not doing enough to treat it, you can go to those meetings and stand up. Not everybody's going to, like, we call it a ladder of engagement. Everybody's going to want to do something a little different. Some people just a little bit. Some people will get more deeply involved. Or it doesn't matter what you do, there's a little something you can do to help protect your waters. And you can think about it as your home waters.
Well, I think a lot of it is in creating the awareness just among the average citizen and even ourselves, and awakening even amongst our own Anishinaabe people and Haudenosaunee people, Inuit people, about the awareness we have that of our role as stewards of this resource. We have to learn all these things, and everyone will have a different role to play, and what's really also a neat thing that's happening is that the Benogamy Project and Royal Canadian Geographic and the Swim Drink Fish organizations have been doing projects with First Nations already. And, some of it is, hubs, monitoring water quality, again, creating awareness out there. So, and I think going into the future, we're going to see more different types of engagement happen particularly as we get advice from these knowledge keepers and steer us in the directions that we need to be directed to, about how to really create this awareness that's we need to do with this Benogamy initiative.
We want as many people as possible to look up the project and learn. So we have a website, biinaagami.org. It's biinaagami.org. And there's lots of stories. The other thing on that website you'll be able to see, we have digitized our map, so you can interact with the map and explore the map, and that will be changing over time. You'll also be able at that site, once we're ready, to book the giant floor map and educator resources to go into your school. We anticipate there's going to be high demand for that. And that's how you can find us.
Chi-miigwech for sharing about this initiative. Chi-miigwech Meredith Brown, Chi-miigwech Patrick Madabi for sharing and being a part of the podcast today. Miigwech. Keep an eye out for the interactive Benogamy floor map coming to a community near you. Or visit the Canadian Geographic Education website to book it for your school or community event. You can also discover other ways to get involved in water protection online at benogamy.org. And you will find stories sharing Indigenous perspectives of the watershed in Canadian Geographic magazine. Chi-miigwech to our guests, to the Anishinaabeg Nation Lands and Resources Department, and to Lori McLeod-Shabakijik, our Anishinaabemowin coordinator, for her help with the script. This episode includes our theme song, Brothers, by Wolf Saga and Chippewa Travelers, and the track Curiosity by Justin Delorme and Chippewa Travelers, both licensed through Nagamo Publishing. We also heard the tracks Deep Relaxation and Magic Scout by Kevin MacLeod. Chi-miigwech for listening to Bemadzajig Ganonendwa. Until next time, Bama Pi.